Um, Carolyn and Walter still not feeling well, I understand. Maybe it won't be long till things will warm up and we'll be complaining about the hot weather. Well, we are moving along. We're on lesson 14, and we're going to move into the opposition of Jesus. Kind of skipping the miracle section a little bit. Of course, that had a little bit to do with the opposition, I guess, but since we all know that the miracles have ceased and we know the purpose of New Testament miracles, we're going to let that slide right now because of just spending so much time on this. So let's look at the opposition that Christ encountered. And of course, we often wonder, why did these folks reject Jesus? Of course, Chris has been doing an excellent job of Wednesday night going through the book of the guy that is answering a lot of the Jewish opposition and so forth. And also we got to keep in mind, Jesus was not the only one who ever claimed to be the Messiah. There were others, false messiahs. One reference, somebody led a bunch off into the wilderness. And, of course, even John, some thought maybe he was the Messiah. I mean, it wasn't as clear cut to them as it is to us, because we've got our 20/20 hindsight, So when you think about why did they reject him, of course, there's probably several reasons, and we don't know all the reasons, but a lot of it has to do with perception. When you perceive something that's going to happen and you make up your mind of how it's going to be, and then if it's not that way, it's human nature to kind of throw it out, reject it. Naaman the leper, was a little bit like that. He made up his mind how it was going to be, and when it wasn't that way, he didn't want to do it. So, there's a lot of things about that. John 1, 10, 11, he was of the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came to his own received him not. So that kind of introduces to us the opposition of Jesus, and we're going to look at some scriptures this morning that deal with that. Let's look at John 15, verse 18 to 19. Jesus tried to prepare his disciples for this. In other words, some folks not going to like you very well. In fact, some people are going to hate you. But he said, if they hate you, it hated me before it hated you. So I don't know if that's supposed to be consolation or not, but sometimes in counseling, you say, well, you're not the only one that's ever experienced that, but that does not necessarily make people feel better when you tell them that. But anyway, he said, it hated me first. If you were of the world would love its own. I'm not exactly sure what that all would entail, because there's a lot of folks in the world that don't love other folks in the world. But birds of a feather kind of flock together, I guess, is the idea behind that. The world would love its own, but because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hated you. And again, the word hate is a variable. There's hate, real hate. There's lesser hate. There's not so much hate. There's So little hate, it becomes love. As I've said before, love and hate are the same emotion, just on different ends of the spectrum. That's why Jesus would say, if you come back to me, you've got to hate your mother and father. Well, that's the sense of you love them a little less you love me. So on the scale of love to hate, I'm above that. I'm at the top, love, and then slide down a little bit.
I think here it doesn't mean to just love less; it means to hate.
Yeah, I think it's right. I think it's used in that sense, but I just pointing out that how the word hate is used a lot. And I think we see in the reaction of people how this word does come into play is very extreme hatred, even enough to crucify Christ.
One simple illustration that comes to mind is how today, well, for many generations, those who don't accept the existence of God, atheists and materialists, have opposed Christianity in every way. Now there's a major threat from one of the world religions, from radical Islam. Islam.
Yeah.
And it's making presence all around the Western world. And it too has Christianity in it. And it's funny how the liberals, the left wing, including many of the operatives in the Democrat Party in this country, have made common cause with those of these radical groups out of Islam. And it's a strange thing, but you wonder how on earth, if they are poles apart, would they have a common enemy, and that's Jesus Christ and his people. It seems to me that makes that vivid. They love their own, even though, like you said, there's enmity between them.
Yeah.
When it comes to us, they put up with each other.
Right. And I've noted that's a characteristic, not necessarily unique to them. Even in the church, I've seen people who didn't like each other, but yet, say maybe a group here don't like this group over here, but then all of a sudden, this group don't like the preacher or the elders, and some over here in this group don't either, and so they're drawn together for their common cause. I guess enemies. What is enemies of your enemy? Anyway, I've seen that happen. I've seen people draw themselves together for a common cause, even though they don't like each other, and things like that happen. But anyway, that's something Jesus warned them in advance. They didn't go into this blindsided, even though they may not have understood the impact of it at the time he said. But there would be times in their life that they would not remember it. Yeah, he told us that. Let's look at John 10:31-33. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "Many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of these works do you stone me?" I've done a lot of good for you. Now, which one of those good things? And he said, "Well, we're not stoning for good work. We stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because thou, being a man, makest thyself God." This ended up being the greatest claim they had against him. And of course, he was God and he was man. And I'm sure that's a difficult thing to comprehend at times. Just like when they said, is that not the carpenter from Nazareth, or the carpenter's son? And I mean, how could he be the Messiah?
The fact they said that, that's like a lot of things that they said, still say, it's exactly the opposite. Because God made him a man. It's the other way around. It's not that Jesus was a man and made himself God. It's that God actually made Jesus a man.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate to take up for the Jews here. They were right in what they said in their opposition. And Jesus did deserve the cross if his claims were not true. Right. He claimed to be God in flesh. And if that could not in any way be backed up, he deserved everything he got. There's no middle ground at all, like some liberals today would propose, who's a great teacher and so on. He did make himself to be God. And John is clear. He portrays himself as being the creator of the universe in human form. That's an audacious claim. If you can't back that one up, there's something wrong. Really bad. And that's what they thought. He was just a wicked blasphemer of the third side.
And the compromising views that some try to offer, oh well, he's a good man, good teacher, but you know, he really wasn't. He really wasn't what he claimed to be. Well, I mean, you can't take that position, because if he's not what he claimed to be, then he's not good at all. I mean, he's a fraud, a cheat, a liar. So he either is everything he claimed to be, or he's nothing. And like Philip said, there's really no there's no middle ground there. He either is or he's not. And of course, we've looked at several points of prophecy, and in the book on Wednesday night that Chris has been reviewing, he's pointed out several things that are what you might say fallacies in their objections. But nevertheless, if you zero in on something, then you find out this is going to be our case. We've got to go this way. I mean, how else are we going to put him to death? You know, because they had nothing against him.
Yeah, that's a good point that's being raised about the fact that Jesus should be story about it. He should be completely around with rejecting you today. Nobody Jesus. I would say that about somebody like Muhammad. You know, I don't give Muhammad any right. We would say, well, Muhammad was a good guy. No, he was pure evil.
He claimed to be a prophet, and he was not. And he was a wicked man.
Yeah, nobody makes bones about that. We don't. Well, nobody really said it. Well, Muhammad was a good guy. He wasn't a prophet, but he was a good guy. No, no. I mean, in fact, if they didn't think Muhammad was a prophet, then maybe they would say, oh well, because of all the pedophilia and all the murder and all the, maybe they would. Well, maybe he was bad because of that. But because he's supposedly a prophet, it justifies all the terrible things he did. Meanwhile, Jesus is completely the opposite. His words there, which these good things you're going to stone him for. I mean, that's the polar opposite of Muhammad.
And it's interesting too. They didn't say, you hadn't done any good works. You know, they didn't deny that. So. Right. Yeah, we're not stoning you for good works. They could have said, well, what good works? Well, they didn't even question. They didn't even question the fact that he had done good works. I think that one more. Matthew 26, 14 through 16. This is Judas' betrayal. One of the 12 called Judas Iscariot went to the chief priest, said to him, what will you give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they counted with him 30 pieces of silver, and from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. So we kind of see here, that this opposition. Now, there's opposition to Christianity from other sources later on, but right now, basically the opposition came from the Jews and from his own people, and now even from one of his own disciples. And all of this too is part of prophecy. This is prophesied, and so it shouldn't be any surprise. I think it's Isaiah 53, verses 3 through 7. It's a verse that we're familiar with. I can see the wall better. I can see the glare on my screen. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs, carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, and we've turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, and yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and the sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. This is the prophecy that the eunuch was reading in Acts 8, and he had kind of filled it. So all of it was prophesied that Christ would be rejected. Now, I think it's a lot easier for us in some ways to look back at some of these prophecies and see them in a clearer view than maybe if you were living at the time they were taking place. I don't know how to explain that, but in my own mind, I kind of think that I'm not taking up for the Jews' rejection, but I'm just showing how easy it is to reject when you don't understand fully.
Well, even the eunuch appeared to be a pretty good student of the Bible. He was reading his chariot on the way home, and he was seriously trying to understand it, and he was confused about who's doing the talking here. Is the prophet talking about himself, or is he talking about some other man? He couldn't figure that. So unless we get that key down right away, he's going to get confused. So it was a prophecy once you learn that he's speaking of somebody else, and then learn to whom he was referring, finally it was Jesus of Nazareth. Then the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. The Jews, after the fact, when Jesus came, were responsible. They rejected. They should have known then this prophecy meant that. Although beforehand they weren't sure who the suffering servant would be. But they should have known it referred to a servant, an individual that would suffer on behalf of the nation.
That's very true. And of course it says, Philip began at that verse to teach him Jesus, but it didn't say he stayed on that verse. In other words, he used this, and then he took other verses that support what we see here. And I think that's why it's easier for us in some ways. Like I've said before, sometimes the prophet himself did not really understand the prophecy. And in some cases, there were prophecies that had more of an immediate fulfillment and then a secondary fulfillment that reached on out into the future. So, prophecies sometimes they are difficult to understand. A good one that I think would be back in Genesis 3:15. I think that prophecy, it's referring to the Messiah, but I think that's a very difficult one for people to see and to understand a lot of times. And a lot of prophecies are like that.
Well, we have to be a little bit obscure because you look at Herod, he tried to kill Jesus. He had his home address, and he was glad to go in there and murder everybody in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? So sometimes these things have to be a little opaque, otherwise you'll interfere with their path.
And opposition comes from several sources: jealousy, misunderstandings, fear. It's just a lot of emotion that goes into why would one oppress the Messiah. And then let's look at John 18. This is when Jesus is standing before Pilate. And Pilate is asking, "Are you a king?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence." Pilate therefore said to him, "Art thou a king then?" Jesus answered, "Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. And of course, then, the discussion continues, what is truth and all of that. But there again, this kind of shows another reason why folks rejected Jesus, because they were expecting a reconstruction of the kingdom as it was in the days of David and Solomon, and all of its pomp and glory. And when even Herod, when he tried to kill him as an infant, they didn't understand that this is not an earthly kingdom. But we also sometimes have that difficulty because we are on earth, we are here, and the kingdom has been established, but it's not a worldly kingdom. I remember years ago the preachers used to always say, you're in the world but not of the world. And the illustration they always used was like the ship's in the water, but you can't let the water get in the ship, And I think that's a good comparison.
And I don't mean to get off on that big tangent here, but it's a person we talked about this before. Would it be a mistake then for us to try and make an earthly government out of the church? Would that be a mistake? If we would try to start a government that's based completely solely on congregational authority and based on biblical authority for the church.
Well, we do have a little bit of an example of that in Acts, when they had all things in common and shared and so forth. But for us to succeed from the union, so to speak, and establish our own government, I don't think we would have any basis for that. Sometimes I wish we could just find an island and put everybody on it that was a Christian and get it out of the world. But we're here for a reason, and we're going to look at that later on. But we're the light of the world, and if we, you remember the monks and those that tried to just hide themselves or get in caves and get away from everything. What influence are you going to have to lost people if you're not with lost people and around lost people? So I think we have to stay in the world, but we're not worldly people. Sometimes that's kind of hard for people to kind of sift through. Sometimes I think the worldly people have a better concept of the Christian's relationship to the world than some so-called Christians. My ex-son-in-law used to say, I see some of your members at the places I go on Saturday night, and I hear them talking like I talk during the week when I run into them, around town, and I see them doing things that I do. And, he said that, that's not right. And now here's a non-Christian saying it's not right to do those things. But here's the Christians who are doing them saying, oh, it's okay. So, you wonder who has a better concept of the distinction between the world and the Christian. Some Christians have a clouded view of it. Anything else?
I think there was a guy, I believe his last name was Rushdoony. He's written a lot over the last several years, in which he argues for a theocracy. He says we need to take Old Testament principles, what he would like to see to be, for example, the United States converted into a theocracy like Israel was under Old Testament law when it comes to the specifics of property rights and all the details of the law of Moses. And that's one extreme. It's this theonomous group that I believe that God's law should be the only law of the land. It's the sort of thing that Muslims say they want to do, the Sharia law. On the other hand, you have, of course, in America today, you have this nation founded evolution, so-called neutrality, but it's really founded on atheism, materialism. So neither one of those is the right approach. There has to be a middle ground, whether it's a good government, it's a government Paul says that rewards the good and punishes the evil. Well, how do you determine good and evil? Ultimately, it has to be by the will of God. There's no other way. So if it really is a good government, it's recognizing good principles that come from God. So you have to have some sort of middle ground where even the rights of the nonconformists have to be respected. You wouldn't want to put them in jail just because they don't attend church services faithfully, the Lord's church, the Church of Christ. Although if you would want to see, the Church of Christ have some special favors, and another issue is that once you unleash that genie out of the bottle, it can turn on you. If another group becomes a favorite group, and they can destroy, your liberty. So that's why our founding fathers tried to find a middle road, sort of like walking a tightrope. And I think they achieved it pretty well for a human, earthly government in the middle, and right in the middle of those two extremes. But we've gone to the other extreme now. We're to the far left in this country, so we're the extreme of building a government on atheistic principles today.
Yeah, of course, Jesus didn't say go into all the world and create governments,
But in Sharia law, isn't that supposed to Ten Commandments?
I don't think so, not. No, I wouldn't say so. It's based on cruelty and hatred of women, putting women down, treating like chattel. So where it's not, I wouldn't begin to compare it to the supply teaching of the law of Moses.
and then it goes back to what I said earlier. We have to have, in other words, to obey the Great Commission, and that's part of our lesson, but we'll get to it next week, I'm sure, because I thought I'd get to it today. We do have a responsibility to the world. Now, this kind of shows the fulfillment of that prophecy in Isaiah when he said, if my kingdom were world, then would my servants fight and so forth. The prophecy was he would judge among nations, shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up nation against nation, neither shall they learn the war anymore. And this is talking about the kingdom of God, that we are to be a peaceful kingdom. Now, my view is that he's not saying here that Christians cannot serve the government and they cannot go to war for the government and so forth. I believe a Christian can serve in the wars, but that's my view. But anyway, I think this is talking about the kingdom that we're looking at to be established as we know the church. And this is, again, fulfilling some prophecy back from the book of Isaiah. Okay, let's go on to this part as we actually come to the crucifixion of Jesus. That Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas and declared Jesus when he had scourged him to be crucified. Of course, it was at that time of the year, it was the custom to release a prisoner. And Pilate's, Pilate's in a crack here. He realizes that there's nothing here to be really against Jesus. I find no fault in this man. But there again, as political leaders are often prone to do, they follow the desires of the crowds and the multitude and maybe even the immediate threat that they might feel and so forth. So to content the people. In other words, he said, let me, here's another prisoner over here, Barabbas, and let me release him. Let me release Christ and let's crucify Barabbas. He's a known thief. And the crowd said, no, release Barabbas and crucify Christ. There's a story, and maybe more than one, and it's been a long time since I've read it, and I've I don't remember the details, but there's a story written supposedly of this man Barabbas, and when you think about it, how would you feel? Christ died instead of Barabbas, but we can say the same thing. He died in our place, and so I think there's kind of a parallel there. And I don't know, I don't remember, and it was, I'm sure, a fictitious story, but it made for good reading at the time. Well, we don't know. I don't think we know, do we?
I don't think so. I don't know if the scripture ever says so. I'm sure that there are legends that embellish it probably tell that. It
Yeah.
makes a good story, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the Bible indicates that he was, but he very well could have been. He had every reason to be thankful, and I don't know.
Well, we have every reason to be thankful, but people are not obedient today.
Right.
He could have just taken a grain of salt. We don't know.
Right. I can think, the church in Jerusalem getting together for their visitation program and saying, "Now, who are our prospects?" And I said, "Why don't we go see Barabbas?" I don't know whether everybody would have or not. But anyway, at this point, Pilate is basically trying to be neutral, but he can't. There's no way he can be neutral. And then, that brings up a lot of questions that people sometimes ask. Could Pilate have let him go? Well, he had the authority to do that, but it was prophesied Christ was to die. So would Pilate have been able to change that course of history and not have him crucified? Because for this reason I came, and I think in my mind, God's foreknowledge sometimes is misconstrued as a foreordained. In other words, God knows whether or not you're going to be saved or I'm going to be saved. He knows that. But does that mean that he has set me aside as one of the elect and you aside as the non-elect? Or does he just know what I'm going to do? And people have a hard time working through that sometimes. And it does bring up some interesting discussions.
Well, didn't Pilate think that he was innocent when he said that? He washed his hands, literally, figuratively.
Well, of course, his wife, said she had a dream about it. I don't know about that dream. I don't know if it was some type of vision. I don't know. I don't know if his wife was pro-Christ. I really don't know. But figuratively, he washed his hands, and I'm through with it. See, but he couldn't do that, really. I mean, he really couldn't relieve himself of the responsibility that was his.
Well, I think that was more of a, maybe it was washing his conscience of it. He was, look, it's not worth. I mean, to him, it probably wasn't really worth the hassle.
Yeah.
Maybe. The guy's probably innocent, but it's not really within our means.
Well, what he seemingly tried to do is turn it back to the Jews. Just do what you want to. But then they said, well, we can't crucify anybody. They wanted him crucified, so they had to have the Romans do that. And that's why they were so insistent that the Roman government crucified Jesus, because they couldn't do it, the way I understand. Now, they could have stoned him to death, but for some reason they wanted him nailed to the cross.
Did they have that authority? I thought capital punishment.
Well, crucifixion was reserved for basically the the vilest of all crimes. And that was, and and they could crucify a non-Roman. Now I don't know about uh, their treatment of each other. You know, Paul used the fact that he was a Roman citizen to avoid some punishment.
I mean, Stephen was, not sure.
Yeah, if that was the Jewish.
I've been unclear on that as to whether that's actually, were they doing it illegally or was it allowed?
Back in some classes I took a few years ago, there was a major dispute about that. Historians are not agreed on it. There are those who argue the Jews did have some limited authority at that time of capital punishment. Others said they did not. I tend to come down the side of those who say they did not technically, but they got away with a lot of things. Like they would stone somebody. I believe those events were, at this time, they were extrajudicial. It's just mob doing it. And they didn't necessarily get called into account by the Romans. They didn't care about things like that. But I think the best history shows they probably technically did not have the right for any capital punishment. But they would do it anyway, like the case of Stephen. They didn't
Yeah.
go along.
And I think the Roman government, as long as you didn't put a Roman to death, then would you just kill one young? They just kind of.
It's kind of like Chicago, you got a gun and you want to kill somebody,
Yeah. Yeah, he's
technically.
Yeah, the law of Moses had allowed the Jews when they were a sovereign nation to exercise capital punishment was required. But of course now they're subjugated. And so the Romans don't want to practice every aspect of the law of Moses without their approval.
Let's see the.
Well, the law of Moses would supersede it, but it's a practical matter of can you get away with it? I mean, the Jews were pragmatists and they didn't want to constantly have trouble. They thought they had the authority to stone. But the Romans who were over them, I think that's the dispute. Historically, did the Romans permit others to exercise it? I believe they had to approve on it before having to do it.
Well, the one thing to, we like to say, well, they outlaw, freedom to outlaw to worship, and we still worship. That's the proper thing to do, that's the important thing. So, what do you do in that case? Is it more important that you gotta go stone somebody?
In this case, though, they're not even doing it properly. The law of Moses wanted to do it to stone people who were actually guilty of stuff. Stephen and Jesus were not actually.
Yeah.
I understand, but that wasn't always the case. It was shown the wrong person.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, Jesus threw the ball in their court when he said to without stone. Without sin, cast the first stone.
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know of anything that's not disputed.
He says, let him without sin cast first stone.
Yeah. So anyway, we're coming to this section, so I think we can. And it's interesting. I want to kind of tie this together. There's several scriptures that talk about the crucifixion of Jesus and the events that took place and what happened. Here, the Romans cast lots for his garments. You remember that story, and it was about the third hour, which would be what, 9 o'clock in the morning, according to their time. Third hour. Yeah, when they put him up there, and he died about the 6th hour, around 3 o'clock, something like that. And that's I want to come to this transition. The opposition that nailed him to the cross allowed him then to be the conqueror. So the nailing him to the cross was not defeat, it was a victory. And that's where we're going to pick up and we talk about the importance of that as far as we're concerned and what it means to us. Okay.
We could talk about the thief on the cross.
Well, we could, but that's not, we talk about a lot of things, but I'm trying to line with the status.